paper by our friends at Migration Watch has shown Britain's population growth is nowadays entirely due to immigration. Their latest findings show that if net migration were to continue at the present record level of 606,000 a year, Britain's population would rise to between 83 and 87 million by 2046, equivalent to 15 new cities the size of Birmingham. Rafe is still with me, but first let's discuss this further with the author of the report, Executive Director of Migration Watch, Dr. Mike Jones. Mike, good to see you. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the prime time Independent Republic of Mike Graham. This is a staggering report that you've done, and quite frankly, it's just been done really on the numbers, hasn't it? I mean, we know, for example, 1.2 million people came in 2022 legally. That was reduced net down to 606,000. But I mean, anybody can tell you that that's 6 million in 10 years, and you just go from there, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing, Mike. I mean, essentially what we're providing is a snapshot of what will happen if net migration continues at the current level of over 600,000. And, we essentially look at local authority data, what will 15 Birminghams look like? And essentially what you have is a staggering snapshot. You've got nearly 7,000 schools that will be required, 165 further education colleges, 75 universities. You've got over 2,500 GP surgeries, 135 hospitals. You've got nearly 8,000 roads, over 2,000 bus lanes and 75 police stations. Of course, migration doesn't work out like this in practice because migrants don't spread out in a thin, tactful layer. What you have in reality is a sort of urban sprawl. So the infrastructure requirements for this are enormous, and I'm quite sceptical that the government can keep up with this demand.
Well, it doesn't look like the government can keep up with demand at the moment. I mean, we've already got a waiting list at the NHS, which is rising by the month, currently running around about 7 to 8, nearly 8 million people waiting. We've got people that can't get a dentist. We've got people that can't get anywhere in a car because the roads are so congested. There's not enough schools. There's not enough houses already. It's just unsustainable, isn't it?
Oh, completely. There's this myth that simply keeping the pedal to the metal on mass migration increases economic growth. Of course, the size of the economy increases, but wealth and well-being is very much dependent on GDP per capita, per person. So if you increase the population at such a rate, what essentially it does is it imposes unaccountable costs on everybody else, including the taxpayer. So higher congestion, higher costs in terms of infrastructure, lost productivity. So this isn't a good thing, and the government really needs to backtrack on this.
Yeah, absolutely right. Rafe Hadel-Mankoo is still with us from the New Culture Forum. Rafe, I mean, this is your area of expertise. This comes as no surprise to anybody, but 15 new Birminghams, I mean, can we really see that in the future of this country?
Yeah, well, this is an excellent report from Migration Watch, who, along with the New Culture Forum, is at the forefront of all of this. But it's worse than that.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned at the beginning, this is just the net figure. The true figure we should be focusing on, and I really want us to get away from net figures onto the gross figure, which is 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Now, the way you get to net is you subtract all those who've left from those who've arrived here. But that assumes that the people who are leaving are the same as those who are arriving.
Yes.
In Mike's report, they focus on infrastructure and so forth, but it's the cultural change. Because you've got a huge number of people who are skilled immigrants, people who are British-born, culturally British, who are leaving for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, white flight we're seeing across this country, as well as culturally born ethnic minorities. And there are people who are coming in who have no cultural affinity, no cultural connection with Britain whatsoever. And that's creating profound demographic change, which is fundamentally shifting this nation so fundamentally that from the old mill towns of the north to our capital city, towns have become unrecognisable to the generations that once calls them home, what they once called home. And you can see it now from whether it be in Leicester, the conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, what we're seeing now in London with these protests. If you import the world, unfortunately, you import the world's problems. And we're doing it in such vast numbers that it's going to be impossible to assimilate and to integrate people into that successful multiracial society we managed to achieve in the 1980s and the 1990s, when you had people like Daley Thompson and Linford Christie and Kenny Lynch. No one ever thought about race. They just thought about them as being British. We've gone beyond that. And at what point, actually, does Britain stop being British? When we get down to a point where Professor David Coleman, the leading expert on this, said by 2066, white British will be a minority in Britain, based upon immigration figures that are half of what they are now.
Right. And white British, of course, is already a minority in London, in the capital city. Let's go back to Mike Jones. Mike, I mean, here's the situation. When you talk about a lot of these people coming in legally, you haven't counted, I suppose, already the illegal migrants who come on the small boats. Also, an awful lot of them are coming on student visas, and we found out just a couple of weeks ago from Home Office figures that a lot of the people coming on student visas are coming basically to live here, so much so that they've banned applications now from Bangladesh for business courses in this country, because everybody who was coming from Bangladesh was just coming to live and they weren't coming to study at all.
Yes, the problem with the student visas is it's used as a sort of pipeline into sort of low and semi-skilled migration. So it's become a Trojan horse essentially. And you know, as Rafe was saying, this imposes huge costs long term in terms of, you know, social cohesion, the structure of the economy, and as we outline in this report, the impact on infrastructure. And I think the government is making a rod for its own back.
Yeah, it really is. Mike, it's a great report, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it more. We haven't got a lot of time tonight, but thank you very much indeed for talking to us.